Hi there. I want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that have taken place on YouTube, and this video is partly in response to videos by other users, including a video by Laura Layla called Virtual Real Estate and a response to that by Bike Messenger 7, but also informed by some other videos responding to the recent redesign of the channel page and so on. But what I'm interested in isn't so much the redesign functions, it's more to do with the way that YouTube itself is operating. And I'm particularly interested in some of the spatial and environmental and ecological metaphors that are playing out in there. What kind of a place is YouTube? And we talk about it as a place quite a lot. And I think the place that YouTube is has changed quite a bit and is in the process of changing again. And I don't think that's always a useful change, although I think there's some good things about it. So what I want to do is talk briefly about what I think some of the changes are. And by that I don't mean just describing the redesign. I want to talk about how I see this change operating in terms of, what kind of space is this? And I'm going to try and put a couple of concepts through that, see if that works. And then I want to move on to talking a little bit about what we might do as a user group if we're interested in either preserving some of the ways that the space used to operate, particularly in relation to something you might call community, but you can use other words if we want, but also how we preserve what we value about what we're doing, collectively and individually. Okay, firstly, in terms of what I think what changes have taken place, we know the last 5-6 years there's been enormous channel design changes, but also changes in the way that the algorithms work behind the scenes, so that the way the information is presented to us as users is changing. But what I want to, in terms of that, what I want to do is just to think about it in terms of what kind of a place is being described by those changes. If this was a city, if we're here as a city in this place, what town planning has gone on to change our experience of this city? How has the sociogeography of this city changed during the time that we've been here, and how has it affected us, and how might we wrest some control back over the town planning? And I'm reminded really of a video that's a really influential video on YouTube. Many of you will know it. A video by Mike Wesch. I'll point to the link itself. It's a very famous video called An Anthropological Introduction to YouTube. And it was made as it was a lecture that Mike Wesch did about 5 years ago, 2008. And it's quite early on in YouTube terms, 5 years ago. And he introduces students to it, he talks about it, he introduces some of the key tropes that were playing out on YouTube at the time. And it's really exciting and kind of inspiring video, really. But the title is interesting. He says, An Anthropological Introduction to YouTube. An anthropological introduction. And that term has kind of jumped out at me recently. Because when you do anthropology, you study human occupation. That's what anthropology is about. Human occupation of particular places. Which means that YouTube at that time was the kind of place that was susceptible to an anthropological account. You could look at how humans occupied that place as a place. What rituals did they go through? What communities formed? What kinds of patterns of behaviour did they establish amongst themselves? How did they negotiate changes and differences amongst themselves? It was an anthropological place. So it lent itself to anthropological introductions and anthropological accounts. But I'm not sure it is anymore. And the reason why I say that, I'm kind of leaning on another theorist, a guy called Marc Augé, A-U-G-E, and I'll leave a link in the description box about Marc Augé's stuff. Because in a really seminal piece of writing that Marc Augé did a few years back, he talks about what he calls non-places, and he contrasts these to anthropological places. He says we're very familiar with anthropological places. The history of human habitation of the planet has been one of creating places of human occupation, anthropological places, towns, villages, crossroads, meeting halls, these kind of places where real events happen, in which we all have memories of, and which acquire significance because of our associations with them. We've all got those places. You can probably remember the place where you had your first kiss, or the first school you went to, or the the wall that you had to climb over to escape from that gang who was chasing you, whatever it may be. You know, those kinds of human occupation of places has been the history of human occupation of the planet, really, the creation of those kind of anthropological places, as Marc Auger calls them. But he says now we're in a situation, and have been for some time, where there's other kinds of places, non-places, as he calls them. And he gives examples of things like railway stations, service stations on motorways, airports, some public buildings, hospitals, a lot of schools, not all schools, not all hospitals, but some. Any kind of, a lot of corporately owned places, a lot of government places. And he says these places don't have anything anthropology about them. They're just kind of places of transition. They're places where people move into and move out of and don't leave any trace. They don't have any memory attached to them. You know, very few people remember the motorway service station at which something happened. It's just the motorway services. Or very few people remember the Howard Johnson or the Travelodge or the Premier Inn in which something happened, because they're just non-places, you move through them. And so on with a lot of these places. And he says, and as I say, Marc Auger calls these places, these kind of environments, non-places, because they don't lend themselves to anthropology. Human meaning is not constructed in these places, and they don't acquire significance, and therefore they don't have community, they don't have connection, they don't have the kind of interaction that anthropology and human occupation brings. Okay, so I'm contrasting anthropological places with non-places, and you can probably see where this is going by now. 5 years ago, Mike Wesch does a video called An Anthropological Introduction to YouTube. What I would suggest is, if he was looking at YouTube now, or started on YouTube now, that video would be very hard to make, because I don't think YouTube lends itself to an anthropology in anything like the same way it used to. If you're new to YouTube, and I'm doing a project with some students who work right now, in which, I mean, obviously they all use YouTube, but very few of them have used it actively as community members. When you use it, it's a kind of non-place. You come here and it's just a place to watch stuff. It's like going to a corporately owned cinema, or going through a shopping mall, or maybe going to the waiting room of an airport or a railway station and kind of watching the television that's been provided for you. And maybe you'll chat to people, but nothing significant in the human fashion is taking place. There's no anthropology, you know. So if Mike Wesch was looking at it now, I think you'd find it much more difficult to write an anthropological introduction to YouTube. You'd have to work much harder to find human occupation here. Okay, so that's the kind of background to what I'm thinking of. But and I think what makes me think that is that certainly my experiences of YouTube recently, and judging from the experience of others, that feeling that I've got isn't singular. Other people seem to feel the same way. That it's much more difficult to get that sense of this is a place where people are from YouTube now. It's not even necessarily to do exactly with community, because I know that's a kind of a loaded term for many people. But it doesn't feel like there's anything here. You know, there's no there anymore. It's that kind of an experience a lot of the time, isn't it? We just feel like we're maybe shopping, or maybe we're being guided elsewhere, or we start getting interested in something and our interest dissipates. And where's everybody at? You know, that's the kind of feeling. So why is that? Okay, what I think is happening there, and I think it's pretty obvious to all of us really, is that because, you know, YouTube has developed over the years, it's not as ramshackle as it used to be. It's being, since Google have taken over, it's much more designed. The town planners have basically moved in and are doing a great job if you're interested in town planning, and a fantastic job if you're interested in the bottom line of selling product and so on. But in terms of making a community and allowing anthropological spaces to form, I think that's changed. And because of redesigns, because of changes to the algorithms that power all of the, you know, recommended videos and recommended channels and all the stuff, that the paraphernalia around us, this weird ramshackle ghetto, this shanty town, this place with all of its anthropology and all of its human occupation laid out in the traces and the tags and everything that we've put around us, that kind of thing has been streamlined. And nice straight streets have been laid down, and nice straight buildings have been constructed, and big signs have been put up, and side streets have been blocked off. So these streets, these super highways have been built through our experience now, which take us, you know, as you might expect, to the channels that are monetized, to the partner channels, to the network channels, to major media, to turn this into a kind of shopping experience, or a kind of spectacle, a place to come to watch things rather than a participatory experience. It's a bit like going to the multiplex, another non-place in Marc Augier's terms. So that's why I think it's starting to feel like a non-place, because the way that this town, this city of YouTube has been created, this place that we're in, Google has kind of done a redesign on it, which good for marketing purposes, not so good for anthropological purposes. Doesn't hold meaningful human occupation in the way it used to. Okay, what can we do? Okay, I've got some suggestions about what we can do. It's not an exhaustive list, and I'll put these suggestions in the description box down there. If you've got any more suggestions, I'd want to hear them. But what I'm basically thinking of here, just before I give you this list, is I'm thinking, well, if this is what the town is like, you know, if these streets have been laid down with one-way systems leading us to where Philip DeFranco's channel is, and all these kind of things, and if these side streets are being neglected, the side street that connect us to one another, the side streets where we can gather, the alleyways in which we can stop and have conversations and build up significance, have anthropological place kind of experiences, if that's what's happened, then in order to restore that space, to restore the place that we like, we have to knock the walls through, make more openings in the channels between ourselves, get more lateral movement, create what is sometimes called desire paths. You know what a desire path is? A desire path is an unauthorized path that people make, say across a piece of grass. You know, if you're living in a city and there's a piece of grass that's been laid down, and yes, there's a nice official walkway that goes around the outside, but quite often there's a path that goes right the way across, because that's where people really want to walk. That's a desire path. It's not official, but it's been created. And we need to create desire paths in order to create anthropology. So what the equivalent of desire path, by the way, the equivalent of walkways and alleyways, are just things like links. Google's not going to provide links to us between one another. All of Google's links, the equivalent of pathways in YouTube's terms, all of those links are going to lead to the big places, the glittering spires that it wants to lead us toward. If we're going to open up these pathways, we need to open up these links. So, a couple of notices first before I talk about that. Okay, yeah, let me just do that bit first actually, then I'll give some general observations which you may or may not agree with. Let's see. Okay, the first thing I would suggest is to make as many videos as possible of video response. I know that sounds outrageous. A lot of people don't like video responses, particularly if they're off topic, and of course I'm not suggesting madly spam one another with off-topic video responses, but video responses generally are a good thing. They're a link on the page that we are in unique control of. Every other link around us, all those recommended channels and recommended videos that are around us, are under Google's control, and their algorithms control that. That little bit at the bottom where it says this video is a response to, we do that. That's a link on the page that we construct. So as many videos as possible as video responses starts to build that network between us of desire paths. You'd like this? Go and have a look at this. Yeah, and we decide that. Comments. Comment often if you can. I'm terrible at this. I don't comment as much as I should. I don't even comment on my own. I respond to comments as much as I should. But comments are another connection between one video and another that increases that kind of matrix of connections, that web, a mesh of connections between us, that tightly knit network of little streets and alleyways that hold this little ghetto culture together. So commenting often. If you feel up for it, make likes and comments public. Many of us, I didn't make a lot of stuff public on my feed for a long time, and there's often very good reasons. Nobody likes being stalked, for example. But if you feel comfortable about making likes and comments public so that they appear on your feed to your subscriber, I would highly recommend that, because again, that's another little alleyway that we're opening up between one another that doesn't lead to Philip DeFranco, that doesn't lead to iJustine, that doesn't lead to SourceFed, that doesn't lead to any of the channels that are being pushed by YouTube. It leads to back into the community. Yeah, it loops these things back. So making likes and comments public is good. Recommended channels feature. We all have the opportunity to recommend channels on our other channels on our home page, don't we? You know, you can give a list of channels that you may also like. We recommend them ourselves. I can't remember what they're called. They're probably called featured channels, something like that. But we can feature other users, and some people do, some people don't. Again, that's a connection that we have control over. And I would also suggest that if you can resist the temptation to just feature your alternative channels, that would be good. Featuring one another's channels, forming what Earl, Black Messenger 7, calls tribes. So your kind of tribal allegiance is demonstrated in there. I don't want to make it too tribal, but this idea that here is a fabric, a network, a matrix, a mesh of connections is helpful to develop that anthropological place. So yes, put people down there, not just your own channels. Form or join hub channels. There's not very many hub channels. A hub channel is a channel that basically doesn't put its own content up, but that accepts submissions from other channels and profiles them. Something like the Atheist Hub, which is the most recent one I've seen around the place. Gary and someone else and myself did one a couple of years ago called the Anti-Broadcast, which was a kind of hosting site for distributing information, distributing videos, mirroring videos from other channels around a particular topic. So the Atheist Hub, for example, mirrors videos on atheist topics. So again, it forms a network, and that's really, really helpful. So either form a hub channel on a particular topic of your interest, or join one. Next idea, use annotations to link to other videos. Annotations which we can put on videos are really helpful. They don't work outside of a computer platform. They don't work on mobile phones, they don't work on PS3s and TiVos and all those kind of things, but they do work on laptops and desktops, so it's worth it for that. Annotations with related videos, and you know, maybe your own videos of course, but maybe other people's videos you can put on there as well. And that's a really helpful, again, way of just increasing the amount of connection between one video and another on this level, so that not everything leads to the glittering spires of highly promoted partner channels using annotations. And then finally, on this section, tap into what I'm calling the attention ecology of big channels. Big channels, the ones that are promoted by YouTube and through those kind of networks, the partner networks, those channels do get a lot of views and they do get a lot of attention. So a lot of attention is flowing to those. Yeah. So a lot of people go to see Sourcebetter, go to see Thunderfoot on a smaller level, or go to see The Amazing Atheist. And of course, many people say, "Oh, we shouldn't have anything to do with them because they've sold out or whatever." And there's an argument to be made for that. But at the same time, there's a lot of attention flowing there, and it wouldn't do any harm to siphon some of that attention off, just to open up another little gateway there that leads back into the community. So I'm making responses to large channels, to videos coming out of large channels, commenting on videos put out by large channels occasionally. Doesn't do any harm, because it, again, as I say, it just opens up a little desire path that leads back in this direction rather than everything leading in that direction. Okay, so that's a list of things we can do. Again, I'll put this list below. Just to end, a couple of pointers on a general kind of attitude I think we need to take if we're going to restore the anthropological place quality of YouTube, or maintain it under threatening times. Just some general ideas. The first thing is about actively seeking. It used to be the case that interesting stuff used to come to us. There was a lot of chance, a lot of randomness in the system. So you would go on a video and all sorts of weird stuff would appear at the side. That's not the case anymore. We all live in filter bubbles now. So only what Google thinks is relevant to us will be presented to us. So we can't operate in quite the same way we used to and just be responsive to what comes forward. Now we have to be proactive, and we have to actively seek. So we have to go back to using the search bar, which many of us don't use hardly at all these days. Going back and trying to find interesting channels and trying to be more proactive in our occupation of this place. You know, we have to do that. I don't see any way around that. Also, kind of recognising where community exists. Up until a couple of years ago, it was perfectly possible to carry on almost all of your community life here on your own channel, just responding to comments on your own videos, that kind of thing, or just answering questions on your own comments page, on your own channel page. That's not the case anymore. Now, if we want to be community, we have to be a community across channels. We can't do it all in our own channels anymore. We have to participate in conversations elsewhere, distribute ourselves a little bit more. What I'm thinking of in this terms is managing our presence rather than just our channel. You know, it used to be, you know, even 2 years ago when I was making videos on the anti-broadcast channel, you know, the idea then was manage your channel because it's your real estate and keep it healthy. And that's still necessary, of course, but now it's much more about managing presence. And presence doesn't just exist within your channel anymore, it's your presence in other people's comment sections. And of course we have to be good citizens, but we also have to have a presence in these other places. We can't expect the community to come to us and take up residence in our comment sections. We have to be multivalent, we have to go out. And the final thing, and this is just to do with the channel page, and I'm sorry this video is so long, this is just to do with the channel page redesign. Some of us will have already adopted the new, what they're calling the one channel page or something like that, the new design, and other people are kind of railing against it. But the key thing, it seems to me, is not to obsess over the channel page. The channel page redesign, yeah, some people like it, some people don't like it, but the people it's going to affect most are mid-level partners, because you can't have image banners at the top anymore with really fancy graphics that kind of sell you as a product. It's not as easy to brand yourself through your channel page anymore. But then again, that kind of selling yourself and branding, that's not really a community thing. That's not really creating an anthropological space, an anthropological place. That's playing the partner game. Playing the I want to live in the shining city and attract all the attention game, and I want the superhighways to come to me game. So I don't think it's necessary to really obsess over the channel design. I mean, it's nice to have more control, of course, but that's not necessarily part of the same argument about, you know, what kind of a place we're living in or what kind of community we want or would accept. A community is a community, regardless of how nice your channel page looks. So managing presence rather than your channel and not obsessing over the channel page, I think, is really important. Okay, that's all I've got really. I'll make brief notes, as I say, down in the description box. Apologies again, this video is so long. It's just something I find really interesting right now and important. You know, I do think that the YouTube community, or communities, we're not a single community, and that's important, but the various communities that exist on YouTube, I've been very influential and interestingly, personally, and valuable, and I would want to see that continue. But if we don't want to see that anthropological occupation, the human occupation of YouTube continue, if we don't want to see it become a non-place where we're just part of the passing traffic on our way to watch something that's put out from essentially a broadcast media channel, then we have to actively do something about it. And these are the things that I would suggest. Any comments or thoughts would be welcome. Thanks very much.